as past, present, and emerging. So I am a graduate of 2016, and I'm currently also an English tutor. Thanks so much for joining in today, tuning in. And I also like to take the opportunity to shout out to Sonia for co-authoring these beautiful slides. So thanks for that. And let's just dive straight into it without hesitation. So the outline of today, we're just going to go through units 3 and 4. And if at any point you have questions during this, you can just, you can even just unmute and start talking. Or if you want to, you can type in the group chat and Sonia will be more than happy to attend to that as well. So unit 3, we've got text response and argument analysis, just going through a revision of that. And unit 4, we've got our oral presentations that coming up, and also the comparative. So we want to kind of get a head start on those topics. Cool. All right, so text response, let's begin with that. And text response is it's quite different depending on what text you're studying, but there's also these key criteria. Yep, so there's these key criteria, firstly to do with the understanding of the world of the text, its ideas and values. Then it's also about constructing an analysis in response to the particular topic. And then we're talking about having a textual supporting that analysis with the appropriate evidence. And finally, of course, there's a criteria for your use of language and how well you express yourself. So we're just recapping about the essay structure. And so in your introduction, I guess the most important thing would be to make sure that your contention is there, it's strong, and it responds to the essay question. And then we've got our body paragraphs, typically 3, and typically each presenting a strong argument that's signposted by your topic sentence with sufficient evidence to back up that argument. And it's important to analyze the evidence with consideration of the views and values of the author. And then you link it together in the concluding sentence and all the linking sentences in between. Conclusion, we're restating the contention, emphasizing the views and values, and also the key take-home messages that the author, that you believe that the author is trying to send to everyone. Cool. So the structure of each body paragraph, we might talk a little bit more specifically about that. And so we've got a topic sentence, and that's probably the most important part of your paragraphs, starting it right and making sure that it's very clearly defining your argument, because then all the rest of the paragraph is just flowing on from that. You've got the evidence to back up your argument, evidence in the form of quotations or specific textual examples to support that. And then following from the evidence, it's explaining that in a way that shows off that you know some meta language and also some language techniques, especially thinking about the views and values of the author, and maybe even the message for the audience. And then we have a linking sentence that should hopefully summarize the evidence and analysis, and then it should also then link to the next piece of evidence. So next slide should be a bit of an example. All right, so here's an example for creating contention. And we've got this text. How does Euripides suggest that women and children are real victims of war? And we've got the essay. So that's the essay question. And in contention, we have, whilst Euripides suggests that women and children are victims of war, his overarching critique on the destructive powers of war mean that the play portrays all characters as victims, including belligerents. So, breaking that contention down, we can see that it's considering both sides of the essay topic. Rather, you want to really avoid just completely agreeing with what they're saying. You would want to kind of structure it as like, I guess an example is like agree, agree, disagree. So in that way, you're agreeing to an extent to make your contention more complex. And so we can see that it is shown, and the arguments and ideas that are used to support your stance should really just be fleshing out the key parts from your contention. And is overreaching. So we've got ideas that although we're agreeing that women and children are victims of war, so that's one point. And then there's another point is saying that there's overarching critique on the powers of war, on the destructive nature of war. So that's ultimately constructing a negative argument, like a critique. So that's the point number 2. And then point number 3 is saying that all characters are portrayed as victims, including belligerents. So so that's point number 3. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and I guess I would, from just this contention, I would be able to see and kind of like see that it's been signpost for the 3 arguments that I will see in the rest of the essay. Okay, so if there are any questions at any point, and now that we've finished text response, I guess I just wanted to reiterate that if you have any questions, you can just feel free to shout it out. Okay, so argument analysis. Here are some examples. So we've got the bread and butter of language analysis, persuasive language techniques. And here are some examples of those. We've got punctuation. And here is a nice example of how you can describe punctuation. Pip's, I don't actually know how to say that name, use of punctuation in the inverted commas around beauty creates a sarcastic tone and suggests to the reader that such images are false. And then we've got inclusive language, and a typical intended effect of using inclusive languages that serves to unify a group, but it can also create that opposition. So it's like us versus them, perhaps. So we've got author using inclusive language to place culpability upon herself as well as readers, prompting readers to view her as honest about her own contribution to environmental issues. Yeah, so we want to side with the author. Anecdote in intended effect is typically to give credibility and authority to the past experiences. And we've got jargon used to establish a degree of authority and to illustrate intellect. Can also be used to confuse and distract the audience. Sure. especially when you're just like, what the heck is going on? Um, and then we've got appeal to sense of justice. So, and typically this effect is so that readers can see themselves as fair, and then they would therefore less likely to, they would be more likely to accept the author's argument. Yeah, also, yeah, that sense of inherent moral code and that desire to do the right thing. You can typically see that in a lot of like articles that have like stances on humanitarian issues, such as refugees, for example. Cool. So we've got essay structure, and yeah, so the introduction in an argument analysis is fairly straightforward, I would say. It's pretty much just ticking off boxes. And here's a nice way to remember it, CCTAP. So we've got context, kind of like the broad scope issues. And then we've got the contention, the opinion and view of the author and illustrator. And it's important to talk about the contention of both authors if there's two contrasting opinions in the article. Tone. Typically, you can have a couple of tone words rather than just one. And we've got audience and purpose. It's a little bit subjective, but I would say the most important thing to nail here, it would probably be your contention, getting down the contention for the authors will really, I guess, differentiate one essay from the next. So, yeah. Essay structure, let's keep going with body paragraphs and topic sentence, and is essentially, yeah, we're summarizing the main argument in that first part of the article, and just going chronologically. So the first body paragraph is the first part, first maybe a third or one half of the article, and the second body paragraph is the next one third or one half, etc. Evidence, we should use PRTs and try to keep it varied. Try to like have some different PRTs, different PRT to the last one that you used, and then explain that. Explain that and identify it with the meta language. And then intended effect is probably the most important part. Analyzing why has the author chosen this technique, as in how does it position the reader to think or feel. And then, yes, conclusion is quite optional, especially if you don't have the time. It's honestly not super important in argument analysis. All right, here we've got a sample body paragraph. Just going to read it. Having warned readers against the possibility of building something that segregates the community, the representative of the Grow Slow group praises the transformative ability of forward-thinking gardens that will bring the city up to date with the rest of the world. Whilst the editor endeavours to inspire readers and invoke enthusiasm towards the modernity of their proposal, these encouraging remarks suggest that the city may be on the brink of becoming outdated, likely inducing readers to argue with a garden allotment to preserve their city. And we've conveniently have the evidence bolded, and then we have the intended effect conveniently underlined. So we're talking about the intention to inspire readers and invoke enthusiasm towards the sense of like modernity that things are like moving forward and progressing. And then we've got the intended effect to, so essentially to agree with this author's purpose, with the garden allotment, with the overall big picture aims to preserve the city. So yeah. Oh yeah, Sonia, if there was like at any point, if you wanted to add in anything as well.
No, all
Thanks
good.
for that.
Keep going.
Cool. Oh. And we've got some, okay. So we've got task criteria. Just reiterating that it's really important to show that we understand the arguments that are presented, and even more importantly, the point of view, try you know where the author is coming from. And then secondly, it's that really specific analysis of the way that specific language has been chosen and written to make an argument. Like, so like how does language being used to convey a particular intended effect? And then essentially we've got that control, fluency, expressiveness of language. All right. So we are actually powering through this, getting to Unit 4. So just a reminder, any questions, feel free to ask. Okay. Cool. So Unit 4 typically starts with that oral presentation, and each person's oral presentation is going to be so different. So we're just going to lend some tips that will hopefully work for. And so the task for oral is for you to construct a point of view and an argument to support that point of view around a really popular issue. Demonstrate understanding of that argument and show your use of language in presenting an oral speech format, and selecting persuasive language that's really well suited to make an audience feel a certain way. So yeah, I think this is an exciting SAC because it's so different to all the other ones, and it's a bit of a break because it's not actually in the end of the exam. So in your oral, I think it's really important to begin with a really strong contention, a contention that's really specific and complex and shows that you know a lot about the issue. And so we're opening the oral with giving the audience an idea of what the issue is related to, and you're presenting it to your classmates, so you would have to make sure that they realize that the issue is actually really important for them. So essentially making it really accessible for your audience is, I think, key to opening the oral. And then the body paragraphs should not be too long, but just really supporting the argument really in a logical way, so that each part is supporting a different part of your contention. And you can borrow some of the language techniques that you've seen in speeches and that you've seen in good speeches, good speakers use. So some examples are like signposting, making it super easy to follow, and then having realistic examples. Yeah, one thing that is typically one technique that's typically used to strengthen the credibility of your argument is having a rebuttal. So essentially stating what the opposing argument is and using logic or your own reasoning to basically dissuade that and counter that. And then we are ending with an emphasis on essentially the long-term outcome that you would like to see. So end on like a call to action, kind of like what change you want to see in your audience, like what change you want to perhaps promote. It doesn't have to be like something really tangible. It could just be like starting a conversation about a particular issue of interest. So yeah, so I've said a sense of confidence in your. I guess you want to end well, and it um, it's a big difference to hear a speech is what I'm trying to say is it doesn't finish with a clear message. And if it's really clear what you want the audience to take away, then I think that is a more meaningful speech to listen to. So yeah, let's keep going. And some generic tips are to avoid using long sentences, just because it's really difficult to follow when you are listening and the attention span of your audience is not going to be that long. And then, sure, you can start your paragraphs with an engaging note. So examples are with an anecdote that makes you question something, or humor, or a rhetorical question. And here are some possible places that you can go to if you're stuck on topics. So ABC News Archive is a good place to go for really recent news affairs, I would say. All right. Here are some more generic tips. So we can say that it's really important, once again, to consider the audience. And in this case, it's going to be your classmates. I mean, most of your audience is going to be classmates, and there might be one teacher. So considering the formality of the language that you want to use then, and then also considering how you can make the issue more relatable to them. And then the tone of voice that you take, and you would have to be really considered in your specific PLTs in terms of like thinking about how your audience would maybe respond to those specific things. So, and then essentially, as with any oral, it takes a lot of, I guess it takes a fair bit of practice and rehearsal, and also with all that body language, especially if you're presenting it in person rather than over Zoom this year. So that will put you in good stead. All right. And now we're moving through to comparative. And so this will be your last SAC, I'm assuming. And some of the key criteria here, we're analysing the similarities and differences between the text, the related, so that we understand the choices that are made by the authors to convey a particular message, and we want to use appropriate textual evidence to support our analysis, and finally, definitely address the prompt. All right, so just a brief reminder about the essay structure. We have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and this is a nice structure we can have for each body paragraphs, segregating the 2 different texts instead of like merging them, and like interweaving your analysis of both of them. It's more just chunking them and separating them separately. So text A, analyze that, and then have it. And then finally, we've got conclusion, and it's one, and some of the key differences between those 2 texts. So, general structure of our introduction, we have per line, and involves outlining the main arguments relating to the prompt, to show that we're responding to this particular essay topic. We've got some sentence starters to note similarity, so both text, ... And then we've got point of contrast, while text A does this, text B does this, and another checkbox for introduction is to mention the author's full name and text title, and maybe also the form of the text as well, whether that's like a novel or a play. So we've got our body paragraph structure. And so we've got our topic sentence part of the body paragraph because it really sets up for what is coming, and essentially the rest of the paragraph is basically justifying that key argument sentence. And yeah, it's important to reference the keywords from the prompt here, as well as your main idea, like your interpretation for the prompt. So, and then choose your evidence based on the relevance to the prompt. Yeah, so making sure that it's going to justify the above topic sentence, and that it is also, if you're going to include a quote, you can introduce it, and make sure it's embedded well within the paragraph, so it makes sense, and that the quote is also not too long, to make your life a bit easier. And then we've got the explanation to explain that quote, for example, particularly with emphasis on how the reader will respond, the intended effect of that specific quote, and how it reflects what the author is trying to say, like the author's point of view. And in some cases, it can also point to what it reveals about the character. And essentially, furthermore, linking it back to the prompt, in order to show what your interpretation of it is. So it should be in really in terms of the argument that you want to present. So we'll give an example later, but yeah, so we've got so we're segregating text A, and then we're moving on to text B, and then between that we've got a connecting sentence. For example, we can have a point of similarity, or we can say a point of difference. So a difference lies in something. And then finally, of course, we want to link everything together. So that includes a summary and also a statement for some of the author's key values. And it's also really nice to say, I guess, the key message to the audience. So what the author wants the reader to take away from that. And it might be quite different for each text. So that's okay. So here we've got a bit of a chunk. Got a bit of a chunk. We've got a bit of a chunky paragraph here. And I just wanted to highlight, so I know that we've just talked about segregating text A and text B, and we can see here that they've just done a bit of text A, text B, and then going back to text A. And I think the reason that they've done that is so we've got, in contrast, Miller analyzes the conformity by religious worship, which harbors a dangerous binary mindset. The person is either with this court or he must be counted against it. There is no road in between, as spoken by Danforth, who represents a figure of authority blinded to conform and only benefit himself in court rather than all of society. Yeah, so this point is in contrast to the point previously made in text A, reflecting about the harms of society, the harms of conforming within something that's rigidly set in society. So like in this instance, it's like the hatred for the outsiders. So essentially, essentially you could, I guess it's a little bit optional what they've done at the very end there. Sorry, I hope that's not confusing. All right. All right, cool. Yeah, so I think we'll just quickly actually go through the topic sentence as well. So furthermore, both texts emphasize that the temptation to social conformity may prevent leaders from making the most just decisions for their community. And we can see that it's linking to the topic the essay topic, given that the topics, some of the words of the essay topic are keywords of the essay topic are used. So community leaders, misguided. So the idea of being misguided is explored, specifically asking the question, how and why are leaders misguided? So we're talking about they're misguided in a way because they are pressured by the temptation to conform to the social conformity. Well, that's really convoluted. So they are essentially it's it's saying that it's giving into that peer pressure, that kind of like need to just go with the flow and not challenge, I guess, the rigid social practices at the time. So that might mean that they kind of neglect the justice. They neglect like being like all that just leader, a morally just leader, um, or the expectation of being a morally just leader and making the most morally just decisions for their community, which is a theme that's explored through these two texts. And so the rest of the paragraph, as we can see, is trying to flesh out that concept and explain in what way that each leader is pressured to conform and how that means that specific decisions are made in perhaps less just ways than they could have been. So there we go. Cool. All right, so we're just going to rewind and go back through the planning process for the comparative SAC. And essentially, we've tried to break them down into some 3 key steps. Firstly, we want to identify the keywords, the elements of the essay topic. So, like in an example, we've identified that it's essentially we're talking about the leadership that's being misguided and a comparison between that. And then furthermore, we're developing the topic sentences by considering the themes and arguments. Plug and play. It's a nice catchphrase, I guess, to highlight. In this example, I guess it's one of the key themes is talking about that, essentially that temptation to social conformity, the pressure to, I guess, not challenge the status quo in a way. And that's essentially one of the key themes. And I'm trying to like basically draw that to the essay topic and develop an interpretation of the topic through that. So my first body paragraph is my first bit of interpretation to that essay topic, in the consideration of the theme for social conformity. And then furthermore, we're going down to the nitty-gritty stuff, the evidence, the authorial values, and the comparison. So this is all like the minute, microscopic writing that goes on. So sentence by sentence, we're constructing it based on quotes, and then we're analysing it in terms of authorial values, and then making the comparisons from one text to the other. And that requires a depth of understanding of the author's values from both texts in order to be able to compare those. So I hope that is clear as a summary for the planning process. All right, so we have reached close to the end of this presentation. Are there any furthermore questions? Any questions from any part of the presentation is also welcome. All right, well then, shall have to move on and see. Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, that wraps up for the English part of the presentation. I would just also recommend definitely following the Facebook page. The link is there, and it would just help to stay informed with all the other events, and especially the following English lectures. So this is just a taster of one of many lectures that will be delivered for this subject. So it'd be nice to click like on the Facebook page, and just in order to like stay informed. But I guarantee you that there will be plenty more to come. And yeah, hopefully we can even improve the quality further down the track as well. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Sonia?
Not really, but yeah, thank you for that. But yeah, we will be having, a lot of other free um, initiatives coming up as well, so it would be great to keep in contact. But also one more thing, I did want to take a screenshot for just for like marketing purposes. You don't have to turn on your camera, Cindy, if you're not comfortable, but just a nice screenshot for us for
Sure.
future things. But Cindy, if that's okay with you as well, just because we'll have your name up on there, just let us know if that's okay. If we have your consent to do that.
Did you want me
Okay,
to
cool.
chuck on a different slide?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just
Sure.
so we see. Yep.
How's that?
Okay. Yep. 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, nice. Cool. Thank you very much.
Good
Um,
work.
yeah, no worries. But yeah, Cindy, if you have any other questions or anything, you can message um you could probably message the TFI page, or I'll even put my email in the chat if you have any questions at all. Um, you can just email me,
Yeah,
or
chuck my email in the chat.
yeah. But other than that, thank you very much for attending.
Yes, thank you so much. Great. I hope that was helpful. Honestly, if you have any more questions, you can message or
Yeah,
chuck
for
an
sure.
email.
Great. And I think that wraps it up
Okay,
for today.
awesome.
Cool. All right. Great. All right, cool. Thank you for that, Wendy.
Cool. Awesome. I just need to figure out how to unrecord.
No worries.